Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I got my buddies here, Greg Sterling, Neil Polachek, and John Gerard. What's up, guys? How's it going?
Good.
How's it going?
Going well. Going good. Another big week. A lot of interesting things going on this week. So here's our episode for today. So Apple Intelligence has the promise to create a personalized assistant for iPhone users. However, it wasn't cutting it for John. So, John, you took matters into your own hands and created a personalized AI assistant. We'll get into that and what you did and how that all works. Really cool stuff there. Greg and Neil's company, LocalDialog, conducted a consumer survey where 708 respondents were asked 33 questions about how they're using AI, and we'll dig into those results. Apple is developing an AI wearable pin. They're reportedly working on a new AI-powered wearable pin about the size of an AirTag, and the device is said to include dual cameras, 3 microphones, a speaker, a physical button, and wireless charging. And they're targeting possibly a 2027 launch. So we'll unpack that a little bit. And Google's personal intelligence AI mode in search, where Google is rolling out a new personalized intelligence solution connecting all of the Google products so that you can ask questions in natural language and receive answers tailored to you based on your personal context, blending in your history, preferences, real-time search intent, all these kinds of things. All at the center of all of this are, of course, privacy issues. So let's unpack it a little bit. John, tell us about this this personalized assistant that you created.
Sure. So I think the way to overstate it would be to say I got so sick of waiting for Apple Intelligence that I built it, and that's not entirely true, but I like the headline. When I saw the original unveiling of Apple Intelligence, like I was really excited about a few things in there that just weren't real and still are not. Some of the vaporware aspects, and in particular, there was a demo of asking Siri what was that movie that my wife and I were talking about in text a few days ago, or something along those lines, which actually struck me as particularly useful. Like as somebody who is often sort of trying to recall a conversation or be reminded of something that happened that I didn't follow up on. Like that was really compelling, and it doesn't exist. And now with this sort of new crop of tools that are available, the possibility of kind of building this yourself actually exists. So I took a couple of different approaches and basically created a couple of different versions of an assistant that is able to do some of these things. So I can kind of describe a little bit about what those look like and what the outcomes were. I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'll give an example here of I set this all up using a Telegram front end, meaning I have a Telegram bot and I just chat with that using a Telegram app on my phone. And it was able to go and look at my computer, my email, my messages, and answer a simple question. This was a few days ago. My dog Lulu was sick, and she had to go to the vet. And so I'll show you this real quick. So she was sick. And so I thought, this is sort of a hard question to answer. I said, I wanted to ask, how is Lulu doing? Because we'd been talking about that. My wife and I had been earlier in the day. And I thought that was kind of an interesting and sort of weird arbitrary question. So here's what I posed to the bot. And here's what the answer was. If you read through that.
So it says, for anybody that's listening, it says, is Lulu doing better? Stand by, working on it. I found a recent message from Amber Gerard from today at 3:03 saying, and she's pooped in the hall, which suggests that Lulu still may be having some issues.
Right. And by the way, I love that sort of like, understated, voice there that Claude has, which suggests that Lulu might be still having some issues. So, and then, would you like me to check with Amber for an update? So this is actually kind of bonkers to me. This is exactly what the Apple, demo was, and, just using something else. The only way it could find this was to do search through all of my messages for references to Lulu. There's a lot of them. It needed to sort of say, yeah, this is probably a recent message, and it's probably this one with Amber, and then sort of distill it into an answer. So, so this is pretty amazing, and for me, starts to demonstrate the promise of these personal assistants, right? And what we might be able to get. And so I've actually started now hooking this system up to all of my systems of record, to Todoist, to Google Drive, to my email and calendar, of course. And now it's doing some other things for me. Like another quick example, I was at a breakfast this morning, and the guy I'm working on some IP, and he's a patent attorney, and he said, hey, you need to look up this company and learn something about them. So I put it into my Todoist, and I gave it a little flag in there for Claude to go and try to work on the task for me. And I have Claude watching my Todoist and checking for that tag. And it found the tag and did the work, and gave me a full rundown of the company, all of its funders, all of its principals, what lines of business it's in, and attached that to Todoist task. By the time I got back to the office, I had everything I needed for the task, and I was essentially done with it. So again, starting to get to what the real promise of an AI agent that does work for you might look like, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah,
so
that's really cool.
The question is, like, you can do that, John. I can't do that. Like, how does that get sort of delivered into the broader marketplace? Like,
Yeah,
who's going to do that?
In theory, Apple was going to do that, a version of that.
yeah, and I think that they will, right? So I think that they're going to do a version of that handles a lot of what I just described. They're in a good position to do it. What strikes me as being really likely now. So we've talked on this podcast before about MCP servers. Generally, it's a connection to an app that an LLM can use with natural language. So the LLM doesn't need to know the API for Todoist. The LLM can just say, hey, what are the 20 most recent tasks that were created? Go read them and look for this keyword, right? The LLM can say that, and it can be translated into the API, and Todoist can then send the result back, and the LLM can do something about it. That allows any of these LLMs to talk to any conceivable app, any arbitrary app easily. So like one model of the way that this might unfold is that Apple Intelligence has its own internal connections to answer questions like, hey, how's Lulu doing? Or what was the movie that we watched last week? Or those kinds of things. And those are those types of connections to the existing native Apple apps. But you could imagine a mini MCP for Amazon on your phone. And now all of a sudden, all Apple needs to do, Apple Intelligence, is talk to the Amazon MCP server and say, hey, John just requested that this book get looked up and sent to his sister, and here's his sister. It's Katie Gerard. Now, the Apple Intelligence and Amazon via that MCP connection can negotiate that, and the book can be sent. So that would be one model of this. Every single app you have on your phone has that MCP style connection back to Apple Intelligence and to Siri, and now Siri can easily talk with and engage with every single app on your phone as effectively or more effectively than you can. So I think that's the world we're moving into, and that's how this starts to be enabled for everybody. You don't have to.
But isn't that going to be Gemini?
Yeah, it will be. It'll be Gemini. So Gemini will be the LLM that makes that all happen. Now you still need to expose all these apps to Gemini. So like, Gemini will be able to see that I've got Amazon on my phone, but will it be able to do anything with it? Not unless that's exposed in some meaningful way.
So Google is trying to do this with its recently announced personal intelligence capability in Gemini, and I believe also going into AI mode. It's encouraging people to connect Gmail, Photos, Search, and YouTube, and it will then do a version of what you just described, John, for users, right? It will personalize the experience and draw upon that history and that information. And you can ask questions about things that you looked for, things that you said, where was that document, whatever. And, I think this is the ideal that people want. This is what makes these personal assistants really valuable, the ideal of highly personalized information or accessing it. But it raises a lot of issues about privacy and security. Meredith Whitaker, who's the CEO of Signal, has talked at length about how for AI agents to really work to achieve their full potential, you have to give them access to all this data, credit card information, et cetera, ultimately in the most kind of expansive version of this. And it creates a whole set of risks from a security standpoint, and then privacy issues depending on how much you trust the platform. I, for example, will not connect those apps to Google. I will not give Google access to those apps, even though Google may be getting access to the information in its silos, because it's all just going to be combined for ad targeting purposes ultimately. It's an ostensible consumer benefit. It's a competitive strategy to sort of box out ChatGPT, but it masquerades as a consumer benefit when it's really about kind of getting more data about you to do a better job of serving ads to you.
Would you pay a fee though, Greg, to do it and say no ads? I'll do that. I want all these connected, but I don't want ads coming to me because of all this.
Well, that's where would the ads not appear though?
Well, I mean,
in Gemini,
I mean, Google. If you say their end game is to just bombard you with ads.
No, they want to serve more precise. They want to be more laser focused with their ads, not necessarily volume, even though they're doing that too. No, the short answer is no. I would not pay to. I would not do it. I'm not going to do it under any circumstances. There's nothing you could offer me $1 million right now, Neil. I'm not going to do it.
How about
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Not with the
Well,
font.
there's an important point that I would make, which is years ago when all these technologies were relatively new, not AI, but search and some of these other things, and these companies were different companies. People were excited about innovation, how things were being improved, convenience, kind of, oh, look at this cool thing that this or that company could do. In the interim between sort of Web 1.5, 1.0, 1.5, and today, it's a very different environment. It's a very, very different environment. And I was a big booster of Google in the early days. Now I am a critic and detractor. I do not see Google as a company that has anybody's best interests at heart. I do not see them as a company making the world a better place. I see them as a company purely existing to maximize ad revenue. Everything else is subordinate to that goal.
That's coming from an iPhone user, right? But don't forget that, you've got how many millions of Android users that already have all of that.
Yeah, this is all gonna be default for them. They're gonna do it. They'll be, there are a lot of people in the United States that are asleep. We can have a discussion about that.
I'm curious about is the risk that's sort of being described here, so
generic. So there's cybersecurity risks, which I can't speak to, but there's generic distrust, right? So Google said, hey, if you go into incognito mode, we're not going to track anything you do or record anything you do. Boom, that was proven to be a lie. And they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to settle a big class action. That's repeatedly been the case with them. They'll represent something, and then it turns out not to be entirely true.
How does Apple play in this game when they've prided themselves and built a whole brand on privacy?
The problem for Apple, yes, that's a big problem because they just did a deal with Google to use Gemini to power Siri. Right. I think that's a big problem for Apple. They're going to finesse it and say, oh, it's the private server and everything is firewalled and segregated and Gemini's not going to do this. And I think it goes to the heart of their privacy claims, and it degrades those claims and makes them less credible. Yeah.
And they've run ads over and over about their privacy stuff.
Andy doesn't like this conversation.
For sure. I was going to say this actually is a great lead into the next story, which is that Apple is developing an AI wearable pen that has dual cameras, 3 microphones, a speaker, a physical button, wireless charging, right? And so when you have a pen on on any device, you could have it on your shirt or just put it on your backpack or what have you. that is collecting a ton of information. If it does have Gemini connected to Siri, you've now fed that much more data into Siri, and therefore
Kinda like
into
a body cam. Isn't it
Yeah,
an
like a body.
advanced body cam?
It's
Yeah, I hear.
fulfilling fulfilling Larry Ellison's fantasy of everyone wearing a body cam.
Yeah, I hear that there's a panic button on it that is a summon Big Brother button. You just push it and Big Brother shows up. It's amazing.
Well, it raises the real, I mean, Andy's point is really justified. It's like, okay, I mean, we don't know what the value proposition is. What is the benefit of having this thing?
Yeah.
But are people going to bristle at the idea that I've got now a surveillance device that I have my phone as a surveillance device, but I've got another thing that's going to be
not as overt as having a always on camera that's pointed at people that you're talking to. I mean, you could, if you wanted to do that, it's weird, or you could hang your phone on your necklace if you wanted to do something like that, just have it on like a body cam, but nobody does that in practicality. When you have a little device that's about this big right here, that's like a tiny little thing, and it's discreet, and maybe the people that you're talking to don't even know that you have it on. That gets to be a little Black Mirror, right? Like that's and then you can rewind it like Black Mirror episode. I mean, it feels like a little bit like we're going to this little
but
reality and like slamming on the gas to get there with a lot of these devices.
think about the humane AI pin. I mean, that didn't really work well. Apparently, I didn't have one, but they raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It was going to be a similar kind of device. It was going to cost. I mean, it was too expensive. Also, it's going to cost like $600, and you have to pay a ongoing subscription fee for whatever the data, and that failed. That just totally flopped.
Early days. I mean, there wasn't enough infrastructure.
It was like last year.
Well, yeah, but still,
Early days of AI, isn't it?
it's different when you're Apple, or it's different when you're Google.
They'll do a better job. They'll admittedly, certainly they'll do a better job of both in terms of the aesthetics and the functionality and all of that. And it's integrated into the Apple ecosystem. But what is the conceivable benefit of it?
It's true. I do wonder if there's going to be some sort of revolt against a lot of these devices that will be coming out, where you have OpenAI who's going to have either a pen device or another a wearable.
Why not just my watch? I mean, I know
how many devices do people need?
Could be, but I guess the question is, to your point, Greg, like, what is the benefit of this? It seems like all these companies are going, strong into it. So either people just kind of abide and they just spend their, a couple $100 per device to get it, so that maybe it helps them remember, or it helps them connect to some sort of personalized agent.
Isn't it the value proposition to anticipate stuff for us? Ultimately, like to get in front of us having to think, oh, I want to go have pizza. It knows I want, Neil, you might like this pizza place. I know you go to. I mean,
those are all sort of demo sci-fi fantasy scenarios.
Well, I mean, so what then? If that's not it, to anticipate needs, what is the benefit?
Well, so I could imagine earbuds, right? So one of the theories about what OpenAI is going to come out with this year is a set of earbuds. It may not be, but I could imagine those being a useful thing. You can talk, right? You could say, "Hey, personal assistant, give me this information," or query my chat logs, or whatever, your scenario, John. And so I could imagine that being useful, because you're in a situation where you need to be hands-free. That seems to have some utility to me. And maybe the AI pin will tap into the Apple AirPods in some way, and so you can use that functionality. But I just don't see. I see it as a superfluous device. Unless something extraordinary, like you've got the watch, you've got the phone, you've got the earbuds. You got the laptop. How many other things maybe some people have Meta glasses, and Apple's going to come out with some glasses apparently as well.
In our next story, Greg and Neil's company, LocalDialog, conducted a consumer survey where 708 respondents were asked 33 questions about how they're using AI these days. Greg, tell us a little bit about some of the results that you guys got.
Yeah, before I go to the slides, I'll just give you some background. This is our fourth consumer AI survey since November of 2024. Different sample sizes, but all of them kind of statistically valid. And we ask consumers about their adoption of AI, how they're using it, what they like, what they don't like, do they trust it, how's it impacted their Google usage, if at all, are they paying for it? So we ask those questions, and we throw in new questions every time. I'm going to show just a small number of slides from this most recent survey that you mentioned, Andy. This is what Andy said. 708 people started the survey. There were 2 screening questions. These are U.S. adults, 2 screening questions. They had to use search more frequently than monthly, at least monthly. And they also had to have used an AI tool, didn't have to be any particular one, any of them, within the last 6 months. So fairly low bar, but it doesn't include everybody. So we asked them a whole bunch of questions, and I'm just going to show a couple. We asked them, has your AI usage changed in the last 6 months? And half of these respondents said it's increased. And what we have seen historically is people moving from more casual to more frequent usage. So more people migrating from, once a month to once a week to daily to multiple times a day. We asked them to identify their primary AI tool. What is the one that you use the most, assuming that people use multiple tools? Some people don't, but many people do. What is their primary tool? That turned out to be mainly ChatGPT, but Gemini has a pretty healthy slice of that. And then we asked them, have you changed? Have you switched in the last 6 months? And you would expect, given all the news around Gemini's momentum, that it would be a migration from ChatGPT to Gemini. But what we see here for almost half of this audience, they said they had switched. And you have to recognize that this is all just self-reported data. We're not verifying this in some other way. This is just what people are telling us about their own behavior. Half said that they switched, and the majority of those people were going to ChatGPT, which is contrary to this narrative that Gemini is, now ascendant and ChatGPT is losing its position in the market. There's some evidence of that, but this is kind of interesting. And we asked them then, why did you switch? And the main reason was, this was a select all that apply. So people cited many things, but basically it's better answers and, better performance, faster responses. So most of these people are saying, just crudely speaking here, that they feel that ChatGPT is giving them better answers still than Gemini. That's what most of these respondents are saying. And I think that's kind of interesting. We asked them about AI overviews on Google and AI mode, and a number of follow-up questions about those. I'm only going to focus on AI mode here because that's the newer feature. Neil, my partner, was skeptical of this. He said he didn't think that 3/4 of the audience had seen or used AI mode, but this is what they're saying. 3/4 of these people said they had seen or heard of at least AI mode. And then for the people that said yes, we took them into a few more questions, including how does AI mode and that experience, which is very ChatGPT or Gemini-like, compare with traditional Google search? And overwhelmingly, these people said they liked it better, that they thought it was better. And the way that I interpret this data is that they're really responding to the conversational user experience. It's not that they've systematically compared results for accuracy and quality, but I think they just like, and what our other survey data show is that people really prefer the conversational UI to the traditional search experience. And I think that's what's
It makes a lot of
here.
sense. If you think about that, for me, how many times have you modified your search to sort of fit within what you think is Google's language or what's going to be deliver the best result?
Totally.
And you modify it. You don't talk like that.
Right.
You don't say like, restaurant Santa Monica ever. to do a search,
Well,
but
and it
you will Google
exactly.
if you really want to use AI. You're not going to say that. You're going to say, what are the best restaurants in Santa Monica, or what are the best restaurants near me right now, and that type of a thing. And so you'll use more natural language, and because of that, that alone just delivers a better experience.
Well, and significantly, people can follow up. You could never follow up on anything in Google. You would do an entirely new search. So if you said, give me the best Japanese restaurant in Santa Monica, California, it would give you a list, and then you would have to click and search for the information, whatever you were looking for. But with AI, you can say, do they have a private room? Is there parking? You can ask all these contextually related follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that people appreciate most. It's much more efficient. I mean, in my experience, people will disagree with me, but in my experience, using traditional Google has become incredibly inefficient versus using AI. And, all the questions that I used to ask, Google, informational questions. I just ask ChatGPT. I don't even go to Google. I just ask ChatGPT these top of funnel questions or informational questions that I would have asked.
Yeah.
And then so this is the final slide in this little mini presentation here. So we asked a subset of people who had had kind of multiple touches with Google AI products. Google has, a thing called Web Guide. They have AI overviews. They have AI mode. They have Gemini. So they have all these different experiences. And people that had some exposure to those, we asked them, if you look at Google holistically, Google's AI experiences holistically, how do those compare to ChatGPT? And the plurality, the largest single group, said it's better. It's better than ChatGPT. And then, if you about the same was the next, and then not as good. I think we can infer from this that people generally perceive ChatGPT and Google quality to be roughly the same, except that seems to contradict this idea that a large chunk of people have shifted from something else. It doesn't have to be Gemini. It might be Claude, might be Grok, might be Copilot. But I think this idea here that Gemini has caught up in the public mind in terms of quality is obviously good news for Google and creates risk for ChatGPT, because Google has all this distribution. As we discussed earlier, they're integrating all these things together in this personalized, they're leveraging all of their existing channels and distribution and Gmail and Chrome and search and Android and so on and so forth. And that's a substantial advantage. And if ChatGPT sort of loses its perception of being the leader or better, that's problematic. There is still a lot of loyalty, and ChatGPT still does have tremendous brand strength. But I think it creates a lot of vulnerability.
I wonder, I mean, it feels to me like they're vulnerable on both sides. Like I've actually, as a kind of power user, I've gone more to Claude because it feels like ChatGPT has sort of not been able to deliver or keep up with what Claude's doing. And so meanwhile, if they're getting eroded on the power user side by Claude or, other approaches, and they're getting eroded on the consumer side by Gemini, that seems like a pretty dangerous position.
I think that's right.
So this underscores a lot of fluidity going from large language model to the next. And last week, what we were talking about is how these companies now are developing a lock-in, right? And ways that they can lock those users in, whether it's through hardware or through the data that you have. Obviously, Google is the 800-pound gorilla on the data side, and Apple, but Apple's kind of asleep at the wheel. So what you're saying is a lock-in there, and you're saying OpenAI develop a full hardware suite that will be out in the next year or two, all around this lock-in idea.
That's critical. In fact, it's critical to them developing a kind of, lock-in or whatever we want to call it. Yeah,
sort of way that that
right,
people
mode
stay there and continue to dig in. and the big benefit to the user is going to all be around personalization. I mean, this is why you would stick around in a particular, one large language model to the next. So in order to get that personalization effect, it's all about being able to access your data. And John, that comes full circle to what you're doing in your app that you created, to be able to leverage the data that you have to create these kinds of outcomes that that are highly personalized.
And that's, I guess, this kind of reinforces a point we were talking about earlier. It's like, if it ultimately is about connecting to all the sources of data that are unique to me, that's the way it gets personalized. Is, I use Amazon, so it should connect to my Amazon. I also use, Gmail, and I use tools that nobody else uses. And so my own unique version is going to be, it's important that it all connects to me. You can take the approach Claude takes, and I can manually connect each of those services one by one. But you could absolutely imagine Apple exerting its sort of muscle in the market and basically telling all of the app providers in the same way that they said, hey, if you want a widget, you need to expose your data in the widget form that we're asking for, and then your widgets will be available on the iPhone. Hey, if you want to connect with Apple Intelligence, you create a mini Apple specific MCP version of your app, and it will be available via Apple Intelligence. Now there's no integration, connections, installing extensions, whatever. It all just works. And again, Apple, as far behind as they are probably in the best position to actually make that happen.
With all the Android users, they're that's what they're doing with this whole personalization effort,
right,
on their platform. So it's really interesting to see Google pull away in this environment. And their valuation is being reflected in this whole current market as well. So,
yeah, I mean, the market thinks that they're betting long term on Google being the winner because Google has. I mean, we've talked about this before. They have the chips and the complete tech stack. They have ad revenue to subsidize development, and AI. ChatGPT has not hurt their ad revenue. So, I mean, they're gonna have challenges in making this transition, but their ad revenue growth has not been impacted by ChatGPT usage.
yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up from here. Yeah, this is a great conversation. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next week with news stories that are coming out. All right. Thanks everybody. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.